This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. When Hailey asked me for a divorce for the third time, for the sake of her first love, I agreed. But she hesitated. Have you thought it through? This isn't a joke. She frowned, confirming with me again. Looking at her familiar face, I smiled, finally at ease. I've thought it through. Let's end it. Hailey stared at my sign name for a long time. Have you thought it through? Her voice was low, her eyes complicated. This isn't a joke. Don't sign it and regret it later. I don't have time to play house with you. Her expression remained cold. Ever since we got married, she rarely smiled when facing me. Well, I guess that's fair. There was a time when I clung to her, unwilling to let go. She resented me. How could she give me a kind face? I calmly removed the ring from my finger, placed it on the coffee table, and smiled at her. I've thought it through. Let's get divorced. Hearing this, Hailey frowned even more. Rocky, I'll ask you one last time. Are you sure? Her tone was icy. I knew she was repeating herself to warn me not to back out. After all, according to her first love, they'd move abroad once we were divorced. But seeing her insistence, I felt relieved. Once, I would never have let go, no matter what. But now, I can. Hailey, I said, holding her hand for the last time. Her gaze shifted slightly. If you still can't let G. Before she could finish, I removed her wedding ring for her. Hailey froze mid-sentence. I tossed our wedding rings into the trash, feeling a sense of liberation. 3 years ago, with heartfelt devotion, I placed that ring on her finger. 3 years later, I took it off myself. This marked the final chapter of our story. It's over, I said. When I married Hailey, I didn't know Tony existed. I thought our meeting, our connection, our vows were all destiny. But after the wedding, Tony appeared, and I realized it was the biggest joke. I've heard Hailey mention you often, saying we look alike. I finally made it back from abroad and thought I had to meet you. Tony greeted me warmly. Hi, I'm Tony, Hailey's friend. Thanks for taking care of her all these years. I froze, letting him say these seemingly possessive words. He even squeezed my hand red without noticing. Hailey welcomed Tony enthusiastically. She opened the premium tea leaves meant for my dad as a return gift and brewed tea for Tony instead. While Tony was taking the cup, he deliberately touched Hailey's hand. Although Hailey quickly withdrew her hand, I saw it all. It's been years, and you still remember the tea I like, Tony said. Of course, Hailey replied. You mentioned it during our trip back then. I've always remembered. They reminisced, chatting about a past that only belonged to them. I stood at the doorway, completely out of place. It dawned on me that my marriage was in jeopardy. That night, Hailey and I had our first fight. Hailey couldn't understand my unease. She dismissed it as me being unreasonable. Frustrated, I grabbed her wrist and questioned her. You and Tony grew up together. You were each other's first love. You've kissed, dated, and even vowed to marry in a country where divorce isn't allowed. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide it? Hailey, what am I to you? Hailey impatiently shook off my hand. She didn't even bother explaining. Instead, with indifference, she said, if Tony and I wanted something, it would have happened long ago. Stop being so sensitive, Rocky. Looking back, I should have known. Our marriage was doomed from the start, but I kept dragging it out, hoping for one more day. I loved her, deeply, obsessively. Losing her felt unimaginable, but in hindsight, I overestimated her worth to me. Maybe I didn't love her enough, or maybe I finally saw through her. Either way, if I had realized sooner, that short pain was better than long suffering, I wouldn't have let it drag on. Hailey looked displeased. Perhaps she felt humiliated because I was the one who ended things. But why should it matter? When you want to go to the registry, call me. I'll make time. Leaving those words, I walked away. Who knew Hailey would chase after me, blocking my path? Rocky, what game are you playing now? Even at the end, she feared I had ulterior motives. But what could I possibly want? I just wanted to set her free. And myself, sighing, I shook off her hand. Don't worry. This time, I mean it. After the divorce, I won't interfere with you and Tony. Even if you move abroad, I won't foolishly follow. Move abroad? What move abroad? Hailey looked confused. Maybe she was so thrilled about me agreeing to the divorce that she forgot, but I didn't feel like explaining. Go home, Hailey. I gestured toward her. I'm heading back too. Hailey's eyes were red as she stared at me. Why did you agree so suddenly? She asked. Because I'm tired, I replied calmly. Just because of one meal? One meal? At least she remembered. If it weren't for that meal, Hailey wouldn't have kept bringing up divorce. But wasn't I the victim? I woke early to buy groceries, planned a romantic candlelight dinner for our wedding anniversary, and and prepared to surprise her with a gold necklace I'd bought as a gift. What was my fault? I poured my heart into it, only to hear her say, "Tony's sick. I'm staying at the hospital with him. I won't be back tonight." All my effort was for nothing. Sitting before a table of untouched dishes, I couldn't understand why I was never enough for her. A message lit up my phone. "Happy anniversary. I know you're busy with a candlelight dinner, but I still wanted to send my blessings. You're so lucky." The irony was suffocating. The next day, Hailey returned. She stared at the table of leftovers, then complained, "Didn't I tell you not to wait? Why make so much food? It's all wasted." I snapped. We argued fiercely, and for the first time, I cursed during a fight. Hailey, furious, slapped me. "It's just a meal. Why overreact? What's there to be so mad about? Even jealousy should have its limits." I didn't want to hear her anymore. "You just want to rekindle things with Tony. Stop pretending," I said. "You're insane, Rocky," Hailey shouted back. We both fell silent. I tried to compose myself, thinking we could talk it out later. But then she suddenly said, "Yes, I do want to get back with Tony. Does that make you happy? Tony's more handsome, richer, more cultured, more generous, and he's the only one I've ever loved. Does that satisfy you?" Familiar faces know exactly where to strike, where it hurts most. I felt as if I were strapped to a guillotine, every word from Hailey slicing through me. This kind of life is meaningless. Exhausted from yelling, Hailey spoke in a hoarse voice, her gaze cold and detached. "Arguing over a meal. I'm really tired. Let's just divorce." In the end, she pinned all the blame on that one meal. But she didn't understand. It was never about the meal. After that, Hailey handed me divorce papers twice. Each time she did, her tone was filled with ridicule. "Rocky, it's all your fault we ended up here. We were never compatible. Maybe we were a mistake from the start. If I'd known you'd make such a fuss over a meal, I never would have married you." To her, everything came back to that one meal. And now, Hailey brought it up again. All this over a meal? When I didn't respond, she pressed further, as if she wouldn't stop until she got to the bottom of it. But so what? Even if I explained everything, she wouldn't listen. I had no place in her heart. Whether or not it was about that meal didn't matter anymore. Perhaps, at the end, people just need an excuse to shift the blame onto the other person. Yeah, all because of a meal. I smiled and went along with her narrative. Hailey stood frozen. I didn't know what she wanted to say. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. We stared at each other in silence. Finally, Hailey broke it. "You stay. The house is yours, after all." She began packing her things. "I'll move in with Tony. Tomorrow, we'll go to the civil affairs office." Hearing her say that, I felt a wave of relief. I had worried that when she mentioned Tony again, I'd still feel jealous or hurt, but thankfully, I didn't feel a thing. "All right, what time tomorrow?" I asked. Hailey paused mid-pack, her hands frozen. After a moment, she threw her suitcase down in frustration. She looked at me, part accusation, part reprimand. Her eyes brimmed with complex emotions, layered beneath a thin sheet of frost. I couldn't decipher them. 8 in the morning, she finally replied. Her gaze never wavered from me. 8 o'clock, just as the office opens. She couldn't wait to end things with me. I smiled bitterly, not because I was reluctant, but because it wasn't worth it. All the effort I'd poured into this relationship, all the pain I endured over these 3 years, it wasn't worth it. "Okay, see you at the office tomorrow." I nodded. "Do you have everything you need? Should I call Tony to pick you up?" "Rocky." Hailey hesitated, biting her lip. She continued, "We ended up like this all because of me?" I interrupted. Hailey looked surprised and shook her head. "No, I was trying to say, you said it 3 years ago." I cut her off again, chuckling bitterly. I never responded back then, but since we're about to divorce, I think I deserve to say my piece. I smiled, calm and composed, as if I were talking about someone else's drama. It was like a trivial joke. I spoke softly. "It wasn't my fault, Hailey. You were the one who let go of my hand first. And now, I'm letting go, too. I hope we never meet again after the divorce." Tony came to pick up Hailey in his car. I was the one who called him. Even Hailey didn't know. Before leaving, she said goodbye to me several times. "Rocky, I'm leaving. I won't see you out." "So, I'm leaving? I'm leaving." The third time she said it, I grew impatient and blocked the doorway. "Just go." She lowered her head, dejected. Tony, ever considerate, loaded her luggage into the car. She turned back to look at me with every step she took. I simply closed the door. As the door shut, I saw Hailey glance back one last time, her expression filled with longing. But I turned my back and walked walked away without a second thought. That night, I slept better than I had in years. A weight had been lifted from my heart, and I could finally breathe. The next morning, I dressed exceptionally well, ready for this long overdue closure. Hailey entered the civil affairs office with Tony by her side. I came alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt refreshed. I was ready for a new beginning. It was early, and the process didn't take long. As we walked out, Hailey stayed silent. Tony's concerned words fell on deaf ears. I planned to find a nearby place to eat when I saw a woman walking straight toward me. She was stunning, smiling as she approached. For a moment, my mind went blank. A familiar figure emerged from the depths of my memory. She stopped in front of me, took off her sunglasses, and glanced disdainfully at Hailey standing behind me. With a smirk, she said, "Missed your wedding, but I made it to your divorce. Rocky, congratulations. Let me treat you to a meal." Serena's arrival was completely unexpected. If I count the time, it's been a long while since we last met. The last time we saw each other was probably on the day of my wedding. I still remember it clearly. The night before the wedding, Peter called me and said that Serena had gotten drunk at the hot pot restaurant we often went to. I asked him how she drank that much, and Peter sighed, handing the phone to Serena and telling her to explain it herself. Serena took the phone, laughing drunkenly, and said, "Rocky, congratulations on your wedding." I asked her, "How could you drink so much? Can you still be the maid of honor tomorrow?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Serena mumbled a few sounds and then said, "You're getting married? I'm happy. I'm drinking. I'm happy. Why can't I be happy?" Serena's voice sounded strange, and I wondered if she had a cold because her voice was muffled. I sighed, "No matter how happy you are, you can't drink like this. It's bad for your stomach. I'm happy to see you happy." I wanted to persuade her, but just then, I heard Peter's voice saying Serena had fallen asleep. He told me not to worry, as he had already contacted Serena's brother. The next day, Serena appeared at my wedding as if nothing had happened. She looked radiant and smiled brightly, as if the drunk Serena from last night had just been a bad dream. Serena warmly greeted the wedding guests and took care of everything. She handled the entire event flawlessly. Even Hailey couldn't help but sigh. "Serena is so attentive. It's like she's getting married herself." Peter just shook his head meaningfully. "Of course she is attentive, but being attentive doesn't mean being happy." I didn't understand what Peter meant. Just as I was about to ask, Serena came over and changed the topic, talking about wedding details and comforting me not to be nervous. She looked at me and sincerely wished me a lifetime of happiness. After the wedding, before I even had a chance to take off my gown, Serena rushed overseas. According to her brother, she planned to study abroad. I called Serena, but she didn't answer. I guess she hadn't seen the call, so I left a message. "Why the rush? I thought we'd have a chance to gather properly." She didn't reply until evening. "Maybe we'll meet another time." Time passed, and Serena stayed abroad, never coming back. Peter was busy with work and dealing with family pressure for a second child, while I, exhausted from emotional struggles, had no time to focus on anything else. The promise we made 3 years ago was never fulfilled. When we met again, I found myself in a daze. "What's wrong? It's only been 3 years. Did you forget about me?" Serena poked me lightly in the chest with her index finger, pretending to be angry. "You're being so inconsiderate." Only then did I snap out of it. "When did you come back? Why didn't you let me know in advance? I would have gone with Peter to pick you up at the airport." Serena seemed satisfied with my response and even joked, "If you're not afraid of the trouble, I'll take a taxi to the airport and you can pick me up again." Her words made me laugh. "By the way, how did you end up here?" I asked. I had only shared the divorce details with Peter. "Didn't I say it was a coincidence?" Serena casually flicked her hair. "We must be destined to meet." Hailey cast a wary look at Serena. Though she didn't speak, I could clearly see the hostility in her eyes. Tony's phone rang, and he walked away to answer it. Hailey continued to stare at us. "So, how long are you planning to stay in the country?" I asked Serena. "Call Peter out so we can gather and have a good time." "No need to tell me." Serena pulled me away from Hailey. "I already told Peter that we're going to his house tonight for hot pot. I even made sure he added a clear broth base. But first, you have to go with me for breakfast." "Clear broth? You know Rocky doesn't even like it. Why drag him into it?" Hailey suddenly interrupted. There was silence around us. Both Serena and I turned to look at Hailey. Even Tony, who had been talking on the phone, turned his head to glance at the scene. Hailey seemed embarrassed, quickly turning her head to avoid looking at me. Serena, however, stood her ground and confronted her. "You're meddling a lot. You've been divorced and still trying to control things?" "Hey, Miss Hailey, what's your position?" Serena's mocking laughter made Hailey feel insulted. "We're not divorced yet. We'll get the certificate in 30 days. Hailey gritted her teeth. Hailey made a valid point. But does it really matter matter whether it's 30 days before or after. She had already said during one of our arguments, "Do you think you're great?" If it wasn't for all the paperwork, I would have left with Tony long ago. If anyone should be impatient to get the divorce certificate, it should be her. "Oh, so you're saying you don't plan to get divorced?" "Ask the person on the phone if he agrees," Serena asked. She blocked me and continued, "How funny, not getting divorced. So it's convenient for you to eat and take, huh? We're all women, yet you still pretend to have deep feelings in front of me?" Even dogs would shake their heads. Serena's words were always sharp. I used to warn her to watch her words, that not everyone would treat her like a princess, and she should be careful not to get hurt by others. But Serena would just pat her chest and say, "I don't pick fights with others, but if they step on me, I'll curse them to the end." Peter, narrowing his eyes, laughed. "It's still better to be a woman. We men can't be so straightforward. We have to consider many things." 3 years had passed, and she still hadn't changed this habit. After finishing her rant, Serena didn't forget to glance at me. She knew I didn't like her like this, but today, for some reason, I found myself strangely enjoying it. It seemed that everyone in life had different expectations of their roles. Men had to be considerate. Men had to be generous. I tried my best to stay rational during this failed marriage, but I was exhausted. I was bound by all kinds of chains. I was locked in a cage, sinking to the bottom of the sea, unable to speak. Now, someone was standing up, letting me vent and judging the situation. It felt good. Tony finished his call and walked over to Hailey. It was clear he had heard the argument between Hailey and Serena, but he chose to ignore it. He said to Hailey, "Hailey, I've got something urgent at work. I have to leave. I can't see you off." "What did you say?" Hailey stared at Tony in disbelief, but Tony didn't give Hailey a chance to react and quickly ran off. "Oh, so the original wife left and even the mistress is gone," Serena feigned surprise, covering her mouth. How pitiful. Hailey's face turned red with anger. I had never seen her so embarrassed. In the past, it was always her making me uncomfortable, throwing tantrums in public, complaining about my elders at family gatherings, and criticizing me in front of my friends. I never said a word, but now, I didn't need to do that anymore. "Serena, don't think I don't know what you're really thinking." Hailey's veins were bulging, and she said through gritted teeth, "Wow, you can read minds? Let's see, if you're so wary of me. What do you think I'm thinking now? Do I plan to slap you to release my anger, or do I plan to take advantage of your ex-husband?" Serena said, even leaning closer to me provocatively. "You? What do you mean you? You think you're right because you cheated? How dare you argue here? You're so full of yourself, thinking you're someone important. Let me give you a suggestion. Go home, pour a bucket of oil in the pot, and see if it's the oil splashing or you being a fool." Hailey was fuming. "You're crazy." "Hailey, talk is one thing, but don't insult people," I firmly reminded her. Hailey looked at me in shock, but she just insulted me. I didn't hear it earlier, but I heard it now. Hailey went silent. Serena smiled contentedly. She leaned on my shoulder and rolled her eyes at Hailey. "Came here asking for a scolding? Well deserved." After exchanging enough insults, I decided to take Serena to eat and left with her. Before we left, Serena turned and warned Hailey, "Rocky is an honest man and he thinks just enduring is enough, but I'm different. Hailey, stop making trouble for him in the future, or you'll see." Hailey watched me without speaking, seemingly hoping I'd say something, but I didn't. She stood at the door, watching our car leave. She left alone, just like when she came. In the evening, Serena and I went to Peter's house for hot pot as planned. His wife came out to greet us warmly, and Serena even brought gifts for everyone. Peter placed the cooked tripe in my bowl and joked, "Here, your favorite. This time, don't say I'm taking your share." Serena winked. "Rocky still likes it a bit lighter, right?" Peter laughed like he'd heard a joke. "What are you talking about, Serena? Didn't we used to go out for hot pot often? Rocky would even boil meat in clear broth. He can't eat greasy food. It upsets his stomach, don't you remember?" And Hailey would seriously say Rocky doesn't like clear broth, like she knows everything about him. Serena scratched her head. I thought Rocky's tastes really had changed. You don't know. This morning when I argued with Hailey, I felt so uncertain. Serena finished, but no one replied. Peter coughed twice, signaling Serena to stop talking. He glanced at me and silently put 2 pieces of beef into my bowl. I understood Peter's good intentions. Hailey loved spicy food and always complained that my tastes were too mild, to the point that if the food was even a little bland, she wouldn't eat it and would throw it away. After we got married, I abandoned all my previous preferences and ate spicy food with her. Maybe after so long, she forgot I changed my eating habits for her. I actually didn't like spicy food. I'm even mildly allergic to chili, but she never cared. She never paid attention. After After a few drinks, Serena was already drunk. Peter and I tried to persuade her to stop, but she just waved her hand and laughed. I'm happy you're getting divorced. I'm happy drinking. Seeing you happy. I'm happy, just like when I got married 3 years ago. I helplessly poured her a glass of water to sober up. You were happy when I got married. Why are you happy now that I'm getting divorced? Serena didn't reply. She just kept laughing. She used to fake happiness, but now it's real. At that moment, Peter's wife suddenly spoke. She cleared the trash from the table and added, looks like you're almost done eating, and it's getting late. Rocky, take Serena home. We'll clean up here. Oh, okay. I stood up to help Serena, and Peter came over to help, but his wife slapped his hand away. Serena has Rocky to look after her. Why are you getting involved? Go help me with the dishes. Peter rubbed his hands together. Then I'll see them off. His wife pushed him toward the kitchen. Stop it. You have no sense at all. Peter and I exchanged glances and smiled awkwardly. His wife sent me to the door, patted my shoulder. Drive safely. Be careful on the road. Got it. I took Serena home, and her older brother came to meet her. When he saw Serena drunk, he didn't say a word but took her from me and asked if I wanted to come inside for a while. I waved my hand to decline, exchanged a few pleasantries, and then went home. The next afternoon, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Hailey. What's up? I asked. I left something behind. Just came back to grab it. Help yourself. I stepped aside to let her in. She took a few steps but suddenly froze. Do you not want any of these? Hailey lowered her head. Her fingers clenched tightly at her side, turning pale from the pressure. I followed her gaze. It was the stuff I'd thrown in the trash. Most of it carried our memories, but I didn't need it anymore, right? I don't need it. I cleaned up this morning. The house is much cleaner now, I said. Hailey's shoulders stiffened as she turned her back to me, standing there motionless. After a long pause, she slowly crouched down and started pulling things out of the trash. There were the bracelets we exchanged when we first started dating, the handmade pottery we made on a date, a love card she drunkenly drew for me on our wedding night, and small trinkets I bought according to her tastes. These things that once meant the world to me now felt worthless. They might not even get me a few cents at the recycling station. It was honestly laughable. I put all my energy into maintaining this relationship, but in the end, it couldn't compare to the look exchanged at a reunion. I felt like a gambler who had lost everything. If you don't want them, just give them to me. Hailey turned to me, forcing a strained smile. Is that okay? This Hailey didn't look pretty. She actually looked a little pathetic. Maybe she felt her smile was awkward, so she stopped pretending and focused on sorting through the items she just pulled from the trash. If you want them, take them. At least I don't have to throw them away, I said flatly. Hailey looked up, tears welling in her eyes. Really don't want them? She asked again. What? You changed your mind. If you don't want them, I'll leave them here and take them out when I throw out the trash. No, I want them. I want all of them. You help me find a bag. I'll pack them up and take them with me. There are trash bags under the coffee table. You can find them yourself. I gestured casually and went to the kitchen to start cooking. After a while, when I turned to serve the dishes, I saw Hailey sitting on the stool, staring at me blankly. It was as though her soul had been drained. It was strange. I called her twice, and she snapped back to reality, offering me an apologetic smile. I remember you used to rush in and out of the kitchen, always trying to cheer me up. When I saw you cooking just now, it felt like we were back in the past, and that time was really happy. Hailey, I interrupted her. Did you come to pick up your stuff? Have you got it? Hailey paused for a moment before answering, yes, I got it. Nothing else left behind? Shouldn't be. Okay, I washed the dishes, filled a bowl of rice, and sat down. So, is there anything else? Hailey hesitated before suddenly asking, would you mind if I stay for dinner? I looked at the oyster sauce lettuce and steamed fish on the table, confused. These weren't even to her taste. Why would she stay, facing food she didn't like with someone she didn't like? Sorry, I only made one serving of food, I said firmly. Hailey heard the implied message to leave. Sorry, did I cause you trouble? Yes. She fell silent. You can go now, I reminded her. Hailey forced a bitter laugh. In such a hurry to get rid of me? I thought for a moment and replied, yes. You really are sparing with words. It was strange. Hearing those words from her was unexpected. It used to be me complaining. Hailey gazed at me wistfully, scrutinizing me for a few seconds before dejectedly picking up her bag of junk and leaving. When she reached the door, she suddenly turned around, as if deciding something. Actually, the divorce agreement I gave you that day wasn't. She didn't finish her sentence. Serena arrived. Not what? Serena walked up to me, asking with interest. Hailey frowned, displeased. What are you here for? Wow, that's funny. Serena gave Hailey a look. What about you? What are you here for? You. What an enemy on a narrow road. The two of them exchanged words, neither giving in, until Hailey finally backed down. After greeting me, she left. Why are you eating so early? Serena sat down on the chair. My brother even said he'd invite you to eat at my place. I smiled. Want me to add some? Sure. Serena propped her chin up, smiling at me. It's been a while since I've tasted your cooking. I added some rice to her bowl. Serena ate happily. Your cooking is so good. Anyone who marries you will be in for a treat. She said this while scooping another mouthful of rice. Serena never held back when giving compliments. Back when I faced setbacks, she would always provide emotional support, repeatedly pointing out my strengths, telling me not to give up. It was comfortable being around her. Maybe in the future, but for now, you're in luck. I joked with her. Serena's eyes narrowed into crescents. I want to be in luck too. How about this? I'll marry you. Serena cupped her face with her hands, looking up at me. Since you're going to remarry anyway, and I'm being pressured by my family to marry, why don't we just pair up? That way, I'll be in luck every day. Her tone was teasing, the same as usual, but when I looked into her eyes, I saw them burning with intensity, not joking at all. I froze for a moment. Serena was the first to look away. She suddenly burst out laughing, but it sounded forced. I'm just joking. Did I scare you? When Serena lies, she unconsciously bites her lip. These subtle gestures can't fool me. Even though she was forcing a smile, I understood. Why aren't you speaking? Did I really scare you? Serena looked at me with concern. Sorry, I just wanted to joke around. I went too far. Don't be mad. Even if we can't be together, we're still friends, right? I knew very well that when you compromise for someone, it doesn't feel good. Serena kept smiling, but I could clearly see the redness in the corners of her eyes. Serena, stop. I wanted to pat her head in comfort, but my hand stopped midair when I realized it wasn't appropriate, so I pulled it back. Let's talk about your time abroad, something that makes you happy. Serena stared at me for a long time before nodding. Okay. I talked with her for a long time. From the sunrise in the east to the sunset in the west, from sunflowers to stars, we were excited and tireless. After seeing Serena off, I sat on the couch thinking about what she had said during dinner, but I couldn't respond to her. I didn't know how I should relate to her anymore. Serena was a great girl, but I couldn't just jump into another relationship right after ending one. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. In the following days, I wasn't sure if Serena had trouble dealing with the subtle dynamics between us, but she just stopped mentioning what happened that day, and I tacitly went along with it. It was like we had never discussed that topic, continuing as friends with an unspoken understanding. Until the 30th day passed, I went with Hailey to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our divorce certificate. Don't you have anything to say to me? Hailey asked as we were about to enter. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. Rocky, as long as you say. Hailey, I stopped her before she could continue. Let's get the certificate quickly. I'm going to dinner with Peter and Serena later. Again with Serena? Hailey's mood became agitated. Yes, I nodded. Is there a problem? Hailey frowned. Are you getting divorced for Serena? I laughed. Did you forget? You were the one who brought up divorce first. That was just a mistake. A mistake? Can there be such a thing as a mistake in a relationship? But I didn't want to delve into that question. Whether intentional or not, 3 times she mentioned divorce, each time for Tony. I was tired, worn out, and agreed to the divorce. Both sides reached an agreement, so there was no issue. It's too late now. What's the point of saying more? I patted Hailey's back, urging her, hurry in. I'm in a rush. Rocky, why do we have to make it like this? What do you mean? We're just about to get the certificate. Are you going to tell me now that you still have feelings for me? I teased. Hailey hesitated for a moment. In the end, she lowered her head, muttering, still have feelings for you? How could that be? I knew Hailey's nature. She would never admit when she was wrong, just like now. But that was fine. It saved me from wasting more breath. Let's go then, I said. It didn't take long, and we finally got the divorce certificate. From that moment on, Hailey and I were no longer involved with each other. Before leaving, she couldn't help but call out to me. If I hadn't handed you that divorce agreement, would you still have brought up divorce? Yes, I answered without hesitation. Hailey paused, then asked, What if I never reunited with Tony? Actually, we all knew the direct reason for our divorce was Tony's appearance, but we also understood that, even without Tony, there would be others. Pony, Dunny. Once a crack forms in a relationship, it can never be repaired. I didn't answer Hailey's question, not because I was avoiding it, but because I felt it wasn't necessary. Saying more would be pointless. After separating from Hailey, I went to find Peter and Serena at our usual place, but Peter was suddenly called to work, leaving only Serena. When she saw me come over, she awkwardly smiled. Peter's not here. If it's not convenient for you, we can meet another day. Serena became cautious, tiptoeing around, not at all as carefree as she used to be. I realized then that we couldn't just ignore what had happened before. This forced me to confront the issue. No need. Sit down. It's fine for the two of us to eat together. I sat across from her, cleaning the dishes. Serena looked uncomfortable. Serena, I called her. Yes, I want to ask you something. You can ask. I hesitated, unsure how to phrase it gently. After thinking for a moment, I asked, am I your type? Poof! Serena spat out a mouthful of water. Everyone's eyes turned to us as she blushed and wiped the water off her clothes and the table. Are you still half asleep? Why are you asking such an out-of-the-blue question? I scratched my head. Sorry, I might have phrased it wrong. Serena eyed me suspiciously and leaned in to ask, what exactly do you want to ask? You like me, right? Tick-tock, tick-tock. The second hand silently ticked a full circle. Serena pulled out her phone and called Peter. Oh my God, I think Rocky's brain's fried. What? Peter on the other end was confused. I calmly took Serena's phone and said, it's fine, you do your thing. Then I hung up the call. Serena had no choice but to meet my gaze. When did you find out? She asked. A while ago, when you joked about marrying me. But I said it was just a joke back then. You bite your lip when you're lying. Serena fell silent for 2 seconds. So, by telling me this today, does it mean we can't even be friends anymore? She lowered her head, then forced a bitter smile. I should have known better than to joke with you. At least we could still be friends. Now, it's like we can't even do that. She half-jokingly spilled her heart out. I don't know why, but seeing her like that made my heart tighten. I sighed. What are you thinking about? Serena froze and looked up at me. I do want to be honest with you, but I never intended to cut ties. After what happened before, it feels like you've been keeping your distance from me. Our relationship isn't the same as before, and I've felt a little. I paused, searching for the right word. A little lonely. You're not as talkative as before, and I've gotten used to it. Serena, you're a great girl, but I just went through a failed relationship. It's okay, Serena said excitedly. I'm willing to wait. Her eyes seemed to sparkle. I suddenly wondered, when did Serena start liking me? If only it had been before I met Hailey. But I thought, even if it starts now, it might not be too late. Having broken that barrier, our relationship returned to its carefree nature. A few days later, Hailey suddenly called me, saying she was about to fly overseas with Tony and asked if we could meet. I refused. Let's meet, just one last time. No need, just open the door. I'm outside. Hailey kept knocking, and I got tired of it, so I had no choice but to open the door. You finally agreed to see me, she said. We've seen each other, now leave. I turned to close the door, but she blocked it. Wait, what do you want? I asked, irritated. Hailey paused for a moment, then handed me a cufflink, a souvenir. I used to like collecting cufflinks, but Hailey never did. To her, it was a waste of money. One time, a friend brought me a unique cufflink from out of town, and I carefully kept it in a box. But that day, Hailey went out with Tony on the pretext of business, and when the weather suddenly changed, she got drenched. She came back home soaked, saw the cufflink on my table, and got even angrier. She blamed me for focusing on the cufflink instead of noticing the heavy rain and picking her up. You care more about the cufflink than me. Why even get married to me? In her anger, she grabbed the gift box and ran downstairs to throw it away. Looking back, it's truly bittersweet. Seeing the exact same cufflink now, I laughed. Where did you get this? From a friend. I handed the cufflink back to Hailey. Sorry, I don't like cufflinks anymore. Keep it for yourself. Hailey's face was full of expectation until I responded, and she visibly became despondent. You don't like it? I can get you another one. Pick any you want, she said, sounding a little anxious. I waved my hand. You don't have to do that. I don't need souvenirs. Hailey froze. She looked at me in confusion, muttering to herself, why? You used to like them. You said it yourself. That was before. I don't like them now. She clenched her hands tightly, suppressing the turmoil within, then smiled bitterly. Is it that you don't like cufflinks? Or you don't like me? Hailey stared into my eyes, her eyelids tinged with red, her gaze full of reluctance and helplessness. Even her usual cold, proud voice had become hoarse. Both, I answered. She refused to give up and asked, I'm going to go overseas with Tony. Aren't you going to stop me? Just tell me not to leave, and I'll stay. Hailey, we've lived together for 3 years. You should know my temperament. She completely broke down, tilting her head in disbelief as she looked at me. She whispered, you. Hailey thumped her chest, unable to get the words out. I heard that people lose their voice in their greatest pain, but I couldn't associate pain with Hailey. She leaned on the doorframe and laughed foolishly. The laughter turned into tears. Hailey recovered after a while, then self-mockingly clutched her chest and said, all this time, I thought I loved Tony. I thought of you as just someone I depended on. When we first got together, it was because you looked a bit like Tony. But after the divorce, I realized I didn't love Tony. I loved you. I know I'm awful, but I can't help it. Hailey, you're not thinking straight. There's no need to continue this conversation. Let me call Tony and have him take you back, I said. I truly couldn't stand dealing with her dramatic crying. It felt like torture. No. Hailey pushed my hand away and snatched my phone. Rocky, if I had confessed earlier and admitted my mistakes, would the outcome have been different? It wouldn't have. I've already told you. I couldn't lie to her. I told her, Hailey, maybe it's because I never directly addressed our relationship that you still have some misunderstandings. Now I'll tell you, there's no future for us. I don't love you anymore. The best thing for us is to forget each other. You and Tony can go abroad, and I'll start a new life. You think I haven't tried to forget you? Hailey suddenly shouted. Her lips trembled. She spread her hands and shook her head. I can't. I want to let us go too, but I can't stop thinking about you every day. Now I'm here, like a madwoman, trying to talk to you, but I just can't do it. I came here to get everything out. What if you still have feelings for me? What if you still love me? Rocky, I've missed my chance once. I don't want to miss it again. At that moment, my phone rang. Hailey glanced at the caller ID and decisively hung up. But just a few seconds later, Serena arrived, taking the elevator up to my place. She froze when she saw Hailey. Then, she casually walked over and linked her arm with mine. What are you doing here looking for Rocky? Seeing how close Serena and I were, Hailey smiled. So, are you two together? What's it to you? Serena replied. Hailey, resigned, looked at me. Yesterday, Tony was going to take me abroad. I refused. I came to find you because I wanted to see you. But now, maybe it's better if we hadn't met. Her tone was unexpectedly calm, as if she were recounting an insignificant event, but her eyes betrayed her. Hailey turned, stumbling toward the elevator, pressing the button. It's all my fault. I deserve this. As the elevator ascended, Hailey stepped inside, stubbornly wiping away her tears, then waved at me with a faint smile. Rocky, I'm leaving. That day, when Tony came to take her away, she said goodbye like that. But this time was different. I could tell. She was really leaving. My heart finally loosened. I hugged Serena tightly. She patted my back, confused. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? I shook my head and smiled. Serena, thank you. The sun shone brightly through the window, casting long shadows. In the days to come, I hope we can continue on this peaceful and easy path. The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.